Hi guys, welcome back to Elephants in the Room. Can we take a moment for my little mug if you guys are listening to this and not watching it? I have the cutest little cream flower mug that's just so adorable, and I just have my little tea in it, and I'm just so grateful in this moment for my life. I just feel overwhelmed with gratitude for you guys, for all that I have, for all that I've been through, and yeah, God is good and He is just so faithful. And yeah, I just am feeling a lot of gratitude, and I feel like this season of my life, I've been filled with a lot of negativity and struggle and stress. And so, I don't know, I guess I'm just having a good moment where I feel like I'm feeling a lot of gratitude. And I just wanted to say that. That's not what this episode is about, but here I am just ranting. But cheers to that. God is good. So today's episode is titled, You're Not Being Mean. Letting go of the need to please others and fighting for what's right. If you're watching this episode, well, I feel like most people who listen to this podcast have struggled with pleasing others and this deep desire to always please others. And that is something that I've always struggled with. So I think I've been pretty open about that with you guys, and being a quote unquote people pleaser, or someone that lets people take advantage of her, someone who has a low self-esteem, all these different things. These are all things that I have struggled with due to my childhood trauma. And then all of that unhealthiness led, into my adult life and affected the dynamics of the partner that I chose and my relationships and how I operated in my marriage and all these different things. And I've obviously talked a lot about that. But I think today kind of what I want to address and really talk about is the process of unlearning those things, and also the process of really leaning into a new identity. And the reason I want to say that is because I think that for so long, being the nice girl, being the kind girl, being the girl that everyone would be like, oh, she's just so nice. Nicole's so nice. She wouldn't hurt a fly. She is so forgiving. She is just all these things. I took so much pride in being that, and I wanted people to think highly of me. That was something that was so important to me. Now, I feel very differently now, and we're going to get into all of that, and we're going to uncover all of it. But I feel like in my current life, I am very much getting out of those unhealthy habits that I have from my past. And I have started to set boundaries and to be my own person without fear of judgment and fear of not being liked. And I have started to fight for what's right, and I've started to get more comfortable letting people down and hurting other people's feelings if it means doing what I feel like is the right thing. So I've gotten a lot more comfortable doing that, but I will say it's still a struggle for me, because so much of my identity used to be in being the nice person, the person that's just so kind, so overly kind to anyone, and would just never hurt anyone's feelings, never offend anyone, never do anything wrong. A perfectionist, people-pleasing, kind-hearted angel. That's what I was and what I wanted to be, and I took so much pride in that. And now that I'm unlearning that, I feel like there's a part of me that's grieving it. And there is a part of me that struggles in that old voice, that old, the old habits of deeply desiring to be accepted by others and seen a certain way by others does creep back in. It creeps back in. And so I feel like I've been going through that. And just in all of it, it's like there are a lot of qualities that are so amazing about being kind and nice and laying your life down for others and being selfless and sacrificing for others. Like, I think there's a fine line, and I think finding that balance is a struggle, especially when you come from, one far end of the spectrum, especially when, for me, my faith, I'm a Christian. So that is something I've been navigating and struggling with. So I just wanted to talk about it. So I feel like a lot of this stems from the religion that I grew up in. Not necessarily the religion that I grew up in, but a lot of what I'm going to talk about kind of encompasses the way I was within the religion and the way that I learned to be. And one of the things about the LDS Church, which I've talked about before, is that it is like super comfortable to be a member of the LDS Church. Matter of fact, like if you're a member of the LDS Church and you live in Utah, like you immediately have people's trust, acceptance, and love. Like there's such a valuable thing with like stamping on the badge of I'm a member of the LDS Church, because people automatically assume that you're kind, that you're Christ-like, that you have high morals, high standards, you're a good person, all these different things. And not only was I that growing up as a child, but also I was obviously deeply traumatized from everything that I had been through and the unhealthy relationships in my life with my parents specifically, and my codependency on them, which results in people pleasing and all these different things. So I feel like that was the core of it, but the church really fed into that for me, because I feel like part of the LDS religion that isn't talked about is that it truly is like you are, quote unquote, working your way to heaven. I feel that is very much a works-based religion, but I think the hard thing about it is that they put so much emphasis on the works and on living these certain standards that you naturally really strive to be this like perfectionist. And in doing so as well, that's kind of where you hold your identity and where you hold your pride. Like you're really proud. Like a lot of members are really, really proud to be like active members of the LDS Church because they're checking off like all of these boxes that make them a good person, or by society standards. So I think for a lot of reasons, it fed into this ultra perfectionism, people pleasing, peacekeeping person. I was just, if I could describe myself in one way, it's that I was a peacekeeper. I was just a peacekeeper, not a peacemaker. And that's another part of this, is that is a transition that I'm trying to make in my life, is that I don't want to be a peacekeeper anymore. I want to be a peacemaker. And to do that, you have to act very differently. So let's talk a little bit about the tendency to prioritize others' needs and desires over your own to avoid conflict, gain approval, or keep the peace. So those are three very important things to look at. We people please to avoid conflict, gain approval, and keep the peace. And I think that is the core of where I really want to get at today. And something I really want to like expose is that people pleasing inherently actually is selfish, because it comes from an insecure desire to gain others' approvals. And that's the hard thing about when you're doing good things just for people to like you or to be seen a certain way. It's like, I mean, even God says this in the Bible, like if you're receiving your gifts on earth for doing good works, like if you are serving someone, but you're wanting praise from it, like you're already getting your gift. Like that's your gift. You're not going to be getting a gift in heaven. And metaphorically speaking, like when you are being kind out of a place of, yeah, maybe a little bit of genuine, you just want to be kind, like that's an identity trait that you like to have. But also from a place of, that's an identity trait you like to have. You want to be known as the kind person. Like that matters a lot to you. And when it gets to a point where the way that others see you and or value you based on your kindness or niceness versus doing it from like a pure place where if no one saw it, if no one recognized it, you would still do it, right? It's like there's such a difference between being kind because you really love someone and because you really are just trying to sacrificially serve someone, and being kind because it makes you feel better about yourself and it makes you feel better about your identity of being kind. And you know, others will see it and others will receive it. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to be known as a kind person. But if you want to be known as a kind person more than you just want to be kind, if no one saw it, if no one gave you praise for it, if no one thought you were a kind person, even if you were doing kind things, if every kind thing you did was behind closed doors, would you still do it? And I think we all naturally would like to say yes, but I think that was a way that I felt very, very convicted when I first left the LDS religion and I gave my heart to Jesus, was that a lot of the good things I did, a lot of the things that made me a good member of the church were coming from a place of this deep desire to be seen as good, to be seen as kind, to be seen as loving, because I didn't feel good enough because of what I had been through in my life. And I never wanted to leave room or space for people to abandon me, for people to leave me because of my abandonment issues, because of my fear of abandonment, and also because I continually chose unhealthy partners, unhealthy friendships. Like, I chose people who took advantage of me, and I chose people that I could be perfect for and people please, because then I would be seen like flawless in their eyes. And I thought, well, if I'm seen flawless and I do everything right, then I'll be worth it to them, if that makes sense. And even though I absolutely have always loved people and I absolutely have always done kind things for people out of a good place, I did definitely have to really reassess my heart posture towards the actions that I did and the nice things that I did for people. And that all happened when I left the LDS church. Now, on that note, let's talk about the difference between being a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. Peacekeepers avoid conflict and accommodate others, while peacemakers stand firm in what's right and can still create peace by setting boundaries. So I think that is the biggest shift I've seen in myself that I'm really proud of and that I'm really fighting for, is I don't want to be a peacekeeper anymore. I did that my whole life. And let me just tell you, it's not really loving, because being a peacekeeper and constantly trying to avoid conflict actually allows for no growth and no authenticity. Like, to create real peace in relationships, you have to walk in truth, which means you have to hold yourself accountable and the other person accountable. And part of that is boundaries. Part of that is prioritizing your own needs. And part of that is also standing up for what is true and what is right, even if you know that it's going to hurt someone else. Like, if you spend your whole life trying to avoid hurting other people, you'll never actually be able to do good things. Like, truly, you'll never actually be able to do good things. If you just spend your whole life trying to not take up space, be the smallest person in the room, be the least loud, be the kindest, be the nicest, never offend anyone, never ask anything of anyone because you never want people to think that you're too much or that you're too needy, or never call people out or hold people accountable because you don't want people to think you're mean or entitled, or you can't do that. That's like no way to live, because externally you may feel like you're keeping peace around you, but internally there is like a war. You are when you are constantly suppressing your own needs and constantly letting people bulldoze your boundaries and constantly letting people walk all over you, you're not doing anyone a service. You're doing everyone a disservice, because you are filling yourself with anger, with bitterness, because all those feelings that you shove down and avoid, like, they're going to build, and it's going to build a bitterness within you. It's going to build a bitterness within you, and it's going to create a lack of a safe place for you to even have an authentic relationship with that person. Because if you're not honest about how you feel, and you're not honest about your needs, and you're not being taken care of, it's going to be a one-sided relationship. You're going to be faking it. Like, you think you can suppress your needs. You think you can suppress your emotions forever just to keep the peace within the relationship. You can't. At some point, you aren't going to be able to do it anymore. And you're only hurting yourself. So I'm going off on a rant here. But what I'm trying to say is there is such a difference between being a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. And I really encourage all of you guys to look at your life and really think, am I a peacekeeper or am I a peacemaker? And what do I want to be? And this idea was actually brought to me from my therapist. She was talking about the difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. And it really made me think, wow, like, that's something that I proudly feel like I'm striving towards. And it's a good thing. It's a really good thing. So, but it's hard. It's hard at the same time. Being a peacekeeper, constantly trying to avoid conflict and make others like you, and constantly allowing yourself to not be prioritized, and constantly letting people not give to you as you give to them, and not allowing your needs to be met, and not sharing your emotions, and all these different things. Like, the goal of that is for peace, right? When we do all those things, especially when we come from trauma and unhealthy dynamics, it's an effort to keep the peace and the love in the relationship. Whether it's family, friends, a romantic relationship, a coworker, whoever it is, the effort is, I'm scared of confrontation. I'm scared of this person not liking me. I'm scared. Like, being a peacekeeper is rooted in fear. It's rooted in fear. And you don't want to be a peacekeeper. You want to be a peacemaker. And being a peacemaker takes actually putting yourself out on the line, standing up for what's right, standing up for yourself, holding people accountable, setting boundaries when in the moment it's uncomfortable, and in the moment it's scary, and in the moment it's not easy, but it actually produces good fruits. It actually produces peace. Not from a place of fear. Because you're walking in truth. You're walking in reality. And you're prioritizing that person's needs and emotions just as much as you are yourself. And that is wisdom, and that is powerful, and that is what actually leads to peace. Like, truly, because you may be keeping the peace in whatever relationship or situation you're in, but you don't have peace. Like, if you're being the peacekeeper and you are allowing all those things, you don't have peace. You won't actually have peace, even if the situation feels like peaceful, kind of. It's not like real peace, you know? So, yeah, I mean, I've done this a lot in my life, for sure. I have tried to be the peacekeeper in, more situations than I can count. But if I could think about one like direct example, I would say that it would be when I first wanted to leave the LDS church, and when I first left it, a huge thing that held me back from stepping into my new faith with Jesus and to walking away from that religion was my fear of disappointing others, was my fear of being judged by others, was my fear of people questioning my character and questioning how smart I am, because I mean, it's a very looked down upon thing in Utah for people to leave the church. People think that the people who leave the church are dumb and lost, and yeah, it doesn't have a positive outlook there. And so I thought about all my family and my friends and my in-laws and my extended family, and I thought, oh my gosh, what are they going to think about me? Are they going to be mad at me? Are they going to hate me? It's just like all those thoughts run through your mind. But me leaving the religion was about me pursuing and following after what I believe is right, not what is comfortable. And in the moment, it's so hard because it's so uncomfortable. But like now, obviously, I'm living in the long term of it, and like, it's the best decision I ever made. But like, the truth is, leaving that religion, it did hurt a lot of people's feelings in my life. And it did disappoint a lot of people in my life. And it definitely did change a lot of people's perception of me, even close family. And they still feel that way about me. And it definitely made a lot of people question my character. And yeah, like it did all of those things. I'm not here to sit here and tell you that you pursuing truth and trying to do what's right in whatever scenario that looks like for you is going to be easy or comfortable, or that people aren't going to, be let down. They will. But, and I've said this before, what matters most is what's right. And what matters most is you are accountable to yourself and to God. So you have to be true to you, and you have to be true to whatever it is that you believe in. That for me is God. For you, it can be whatever it is, but you have to be true to that. And that may initially be scary and uncomfortable, but it actually leads to so much peace and freedom when you do it. So, like I said, many ways that I did that. Really hard to come out of that. The next thing I want to talk about, and this all ties into all of this, is the guilt that comes with saying no and the guilt that comes with setting boundaries. Oh my gosh. Boundaries have become this new thing everyone talks about on the internet. And so I know a lot of people don't like when people talk about it, because people can overuse these like therapy words or whatever. But no. Boundaries are like a real thing. Okay. Setting boundaries means identifying your emotional, mental, and physical limits and communicating them clearly to protect your well-being. Boundaries are a beautiful thing. Like, I know I've said this before, guys, but let me just tell you, they are so beautiful. And they are one of the only ways to have healthy relationships, actually, with people. Like, actually. I have said this before. I'll say it again. I'm like beating a dead horse with this because I know I've said this, but you guys know the psychotherapist Matthias Barker. He came on my podcast like a year ago. He's really great. And when I had him on the podcast, we talked a little bit about boundaries and kind of what they are. And I think a lot of times people who maybe haven't had the tools or the information around boundaries, or people who truly are just really stuck in their unhealthy ways and they want to live in them, they don't like the word boundaries, and they don't like boundaries. A lot of people are boundaryless. They don't like boundaries because it takes them away from being able to take advantage, love bomb, all these different things. Boundaries set limits around things that people don't want limits around. So I think one of the beautiful things about boundaries is that it doesn't leave room for assumption. And I talked about this with my therapist recently. We were talking about the danger of assuming. It's really dangerous to assume because most times the two people in whatever relationship it is, they think different things. They assume different things. And so we should all have expectations within relationships, whether it's a friendship, a family member, a friend, a colleague, just a random person in public. Like, we all have these expectations in our mind of what we feel like we will accept and or not accept in relationships, but we oftentimes are assuming that and we don't actually know. And so that's why boundaries are beautiful as well, because it doesn't leave room for assumption. You're very clear and direct about what you expect right at the get-go, to protect yourself and to guard your heart. And then they have the opportunity to either respect it or to not respect it. But that's the beautiful thing about a boundary, is that it has nothing to do with them and it has everything to do with you and what you will accept and or not accept in your life or in your relationships. And that's what's so great, is it's not personal. And oftentimes people who are boundaryless and who don't like boundaries, they take boundaries very personal and they make it about themselves. But really, it is a protection of not only you, but it's also a protection of that relationship. And so I think that if people who didn't know about boundaries could start learning about boundaries, they would see that they're actually good. And even me, at times, I fall into not setting certain boundaries. And then when I don't, I can physically see myself getting frustrated, overworked, emotionally burnt out in certain relationships or situations. And I'm like, Nicole, wake up. It's because you're not setting boundaries within it. And whatever that looks like, boundaries can be about time, emotions. There's so many different types of boundaries. And I encourage you, if you want to learn more about boundaries, there's so many ways to learn about them, especially on the beautiful thing that we call the internet, especially nowadays. Go and find a reliable source and research all about setting healthy boundaries, especially if you come from trauma. Research about it, learn about it. It's a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. And again, it is so much less about them. It's about you. And that's what a boundary is. And what I was saying, I got sidetracked, but I was talking about Matthias. And one of the things that he says about boundaries that I really loved is he talked about how it's like, let's say you get a broken arm. You break your arm. You get a cast and or sling to like hold your arm, right? And that cast and or sling isn't meant to create a lack of freedom of movement. It's that there is a part of that arm that's broken, and it knows that if you further move that spot, it's going to hurt the arm even more, which will then elongate the healing, when that cast and or sling is actually keeping it in perfect place so it can continue to heal as it's broken. So that was one of the ways that he explained boundaries to me, and I loved that. Setting limitations around movement, around emotional wounds and or just things to prevent further damage. Like, it's really hard to sit here and explain to you unless I planned a whole episode on boundaries, which I do have one from like a year and a half ago about boundaries, but I encourage you guys to go and look up what setting healthy boundaries looks like within your relationships, in your life, especially if you come from trauma. Just to give you guys a little context, when I first started going to therapy and I first learned like what even a healthy boundary was, I started setting them. So one of the things I initially did is I cut off communication with my parents. At the time, that was what I needed. Now, I have communication with them now, and that didn't stay the same, but I adjusted accordingly to what I needed emotionally and what I felt like I could emotionally handle. And I also set boundaries at work. I would always work overtime, and I would never take time for myself, and I would never put time into my own passion. So I said, no, actually, I'm going to set a boundary, and I'm going to work the 40-hour limit right now and invest into this business that I have and prioritize my own needs and or whatever. Like, there's so many ways that you can set boundaries within a relationship or within a workspace or whatever it may be. And they're so, so important. And they're really just to protect you and to protect the relationship, especially if it's wounded and or has unhealthiness in it, which a lot of relationships do. Anyways, with that being said, the emotional weight that comes with setting boundaries, especially when you first start, is a lot. When my therapist first told me I had to set boundaries, I was like, what do you mean? And then she listed off all these things and I was like, but that's not me. I am nice. I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to, do all these things. And it was so uncomfortable for me to even think about it. And then let me tell you guys something. Actually setting boundaries and sticking to them, I still struggle with. Because when you set a boundary with someone, you have to stick to it and hold them accountable to it. And actually, I take that back. Not hold them accountable to it. Hold yourself accountable to it because it has nothing to do with them. You don't have to convince them to do anything or do anything, but it's an action that you do. It has to do with you. If I will allow this or this, and if I'm not receiving this, then I won't be in this relationship or I won't have this much communication or whatever it is. It's about you. That's what's beautiful is that oftentimes when we come from unhealthy homes and childhood trauma or unhealthy relationships, we work so hard to try to change the other person's actions to create a good, healthy relationship with them. It can't be about them. It has to be about you. That's what's beautiful about boundaries is it takes the weight off of you trying to control them and what they do and their actions. And it puts it on you and what you will accept and what you will do. And it protects you. It's just a protection. But all that to say, it's so challenging to set boundaries. And let me tell you this. It's so challenging to set boundaries with people that you've never set boundaries with and that you've let walk all over you. People that are boundaryless. When you start getting healthy and you start trying to set boundaries with those people, it's going to be so uncomfortable. Because you know what they're going to do? Oh, you don't really sound like yourself. Oh, you used to be nicer. What happened to you? They're going to start questioning your character, and it's going to, that people pleaser in you, that old people pleaser in you that you are waking up from and changing, the part of you that wants to please others is going to be like, oh, they don't like me. They don't understand. They think I'm mean. They think I'm different. Why are you different? When you start setting boundaries, it's like, oh, you're different. You didn't used to be like this. And it's like, that's the worst feeling because for some whack reason, we feel like we owe people the old versions of ourselves when we start changing and when we start healing and when we start standing up for ourselves. We feel like if we let someone walk all over us in a relationship, we have to continue to let them do that because, well, we already did that. That's already how they know us. So if I do differently, if I set boundaries, if I remove access to myself, they're going to think I'm mean. And let me just tell you, let them think you're mean. Let them think you've changed. They won't get it. They don't get it. They won't get it. Boundaryless people will never understand boundaries until they hit such a rock bottom in their own lives that they have to start healing and they have to start getting healthy and they have to start setting boundaries. People like that will continue to take advantage of you and they will not understand. Now, someone who's healthy and someone who actually respects you and loves you, even if they don't fully understand your boundaries, they will try their best to understand and they will respect them, even if they don't understand. But people who bulldoze your boundaries and people who put back your boundaries on you to try to make you seem like a mean or a bad person, they've got their own things to work through. And don't waste your breath trying to convince them that you're a good person. Don't waste your breath. Like, that's what I want to get across is that it doesn't matter if someone thinks you're a good person, especially someone like that takes advantage of you, that bulldozes your boundaries, that is emotionally or mentally abusive. It doesn't matter if they think you're a bad person or a mean person for setting boundaries, if they're not used to that version of you. It doesn't matter. Let them think you're mean. Let them think you've changed. Because you are accountable to you. And when you put your pillow down, when you put your head on the pillow every night, you have to live with you and you have to live with what you do. And just as much as you fight for others and fight to take care of others, why are you not doing that for yourself? So when you start doing that and when you wake up and you start setting boundaries and prioritizing your own well-being, don't feel bad for it. Like, don't. It's so hard. It's so hard because there's so much guilt that comes with setting boundaries, especially with people that you've never set boundaries with, and especially with boundaryless people. You feel guilt, you feel shame because you're used to just letting them do whatever they want. And at least they think I'm just this great person and this nice person. That is hard. That is really, really hard. It's so hard. That was one of the hardest things for me. That was one of the hardest things for me, was dealing with the guilt of setting boundaries. Now in my life, I can look and see that actually all my boundaries have been loving, and the intention has come from a pure place. And even if in the moment it's hard, it usually promotes more healthiness in the relationship and more love. But in the moment, man, it's hard. Man, you feel guilt, you feel shame. When I first cut off my parents and cut off communication with them, because I emotionally wasn't okay, I wasn't, I felt so much guilt and shame. Like I was a bad daughter. Like I was a mean person. And no, I wasn't. I had every right to do that. And not only did I have every right to do that, but walking in truth and love has actually strengthened my relationship with them. One of them. And the truth is the truth, and you can't run from the truth. And boundaries can always be adjusted. That's what's beautiful about boundaries. If things change, if things improve, you can always adjust. And that's what happened for me. I didn't have to keep communication shut off forever. I was able to turn it back on. But I set limits within it. Like, you can always adjust boundaries as needed, which is why it's so beautiful. And that kind of ties into, I kind of just already said it, but learning to prioritize others as much as you do yourself, and also protecting yourself just as much as you do others. I think it's a beautiful characteristic to be someone that prioritizes and sacrifices for others. We want to be those kind of people, but it's super important to also do that for yourself. And it doesn't mean that there has to be a lack thereof of doing it for others, but just as much as you do it for others, it's also good to do it for yourself. So I feel like balancing that is tricky, but balancing caring for others with self-care is really important, because we've all heard this before, but it's true. You can't pour from an empty cup, because then are you really pouring from a genuine place? When you have a cup full, you can pour the overflow, if not even more. But pouring from an empty cup is, it's just really not productive. It's like you're filling someone else up so they have enough, but then you're depriving yourself. And then, now you have no water. So what was the point, And it's so hard, because I think deciphering the difference between like being selfless and giving and loving and laying your life down for others, which Jesus calls us to do, we want to do that, but also doing that for you. And it's a very tricky balance, because if you go one way too far, it's dangerous. Like only caring about yourself, never sacrificing for others, never serving others. It's like you're going to live a sad, selfish life. It's not fulfilling. There's no purpose in that. There's no meaning in that. But on the other end, if you only prioritize other people and only take care of other people and only sacrifice for other people, you're going to be a drained, sad person with a lack of identity, a lack of self-worth, and you're going to be doing it from a deprived place, and giving from a deprived place all the time is not sustainable, if that makes sense. Now, that can get taken out of context. It's very unique to every situation. It's very complex. But self-care isn't selfish. It is essential for maintaining your well-being and being able to care for others in a healthy way. That's what I was trying to say, and I had it written down. I should have just read it. Self-care isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining your well-being and being able to care for others in a healthy way. When I actually started giving some of myself the love and respect and time and self-care, I was able to love others better. When I was able to take care of myself and actually pour into myself, I really did see that I not only was able to give and love others better, but I did it from so much more of a pure place. And yeah, I just think it really changes things. And I love that. I love that it said it's essential. It's essential for maintaining your well-being. It's really hard to save someone from drowning in water when you're drowning yourself. Like, you've got to get out of the water, get stable, and then you can start pulling people out, helping people. But two drowning people, that doesn't help anyone, right? And therapy obviously helped me understand that. That's what I first went through with my therapist way back in the day. It was like, I thought it was so selfish to love myself and to have expectations and boundaries in relationships. I thought it was selfish and un-Christ-like. I thought, because I'm a Christian, I just have to like lay my life down for everyone, and anyone can treat me however they want, and I just have to forgive them. And yes, I will forgive anyone always, no matter what, but that does not mean that I have to continue to put myself in that relationship. That does not mean that I have to continue to let myself be mistreated, betrayed, taken advantage of. That doesn't mean that. You can love someone and forgive someone, or matter of fact, even be indifferent towards them. And that doesn't mean that you're not loving Jesus or loving others. Sometimes the most loving thing to do is to step away from someone, because two traumatized, unhealthy people that are both struggling together only creates more chaos, more sin, more destruction. Someone's got to step away. So that's very important. And this kind of all ties into it, but the importance of standing up for what's right, even if it means letting others down or challenging the status quo. Fighting for what's right means standing firm in your values, doing what you believe is morally right, even if it's uncomfortable for you or others. This is a hard one, but doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing. Doing the thing that is right sometimes is hard, and it actually comes with more initial conflict with others. And that's a lot of times hard to do, but it's so important. And when you are doing something that you believe is right and fighting for someone or for something that is right, you may hurt someone else. You may let someone down. And you may start to have that voice creep in, like, oh, you're mean. You're causing contention. You're causing conflict. No. It's important to fight for what's right. And it's important to fight for people who need to be fought for, even if it's uncomfortable and even if it's hard. Now, I want to talk about what the Bible says about prioritizing truth and guarding your heart. The Bible encourages us to prioritize truth and righteousness even when it's uncomfortable. Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. I love that. Everything you do flows from it, so guard your heart. Ephesians 4:15. Speak truth in love. Matthew 5:37. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. That is a huge part of people pleasing that is so dangerous. It's so scary to say no to people. When you've given too much, or when you know that saying yes to something is going to hurt you, or, whatever it may be, saying no is really scary. It's really scary. Saying no to people is really scary. But you have to set limits. And that's what I love about this is I think back in the day when I was LDS and really struggled with people pleasing, I just had to say yes to everything. I felt like I had to say yes to everything. And if I didn't say yes to everything, I was a mean person. I was selfish. People would think this about me, that about me. But a lot of the problems with saying yes to everything and everyone is that a lot of times we won't follow through on those yeses. And we don't want to not follow through on our words. So let your yeses be yeses and let your nos be nos, which means if your yeses are going to be yeses and your nos are going to be nos, you actually have to say no to a lot of things. None of us have the emotional capacity and energy and time to do everything that everyone wants around us. Like there's no way to actually please everyone and to accommodate everyone. It's literally impossible. So learning and deciphering what is good to say no to and what is good to say yes to is very tricky, and it's a balance. But the older I've gotten, the more I've found myself saying no. And the more that it's actually freed up space and energy for me to say yes to the right things. So I feel like that is really good and important. Yeah, and I just think obviously God calls us to stand for what is right. And you know, God even says like the world hated me first. If it hates you, the world hated me first. So why are we so convinced that being Christ-like means that everyone has to like us and think we're the kindest people ever? It literally says the world hated me. They didn't understand me. But what was Jesus doing when he was on earth? Walking in truth, walking in love, fighting for what was right. That's what he was doing. So we're not called to be people pleasers. People pleasing actually stems from an insecurity and a fear of rejection rather than genuine kindness. True kindness comes from a place of security in who we are in Christ, not from trying to win others' approval. All that matters is what you think of you and what God thinks of you. And if you feel like you're doing what is right at the end of the day and you're doing what's right before God, that is what matters. I kind of talked about this, but I think that's what I've been struggling with the most is just grieving the old version of myself that I was, because I put so much of my identity into being the kind, nice, patient one. The one that people would be like, oh, she's just the nicest. She allows anything and she would forgive anyone and she is the kindest, most patient. Like that's what has been said about me in the past. And I've changed so much for the better in my opinion, but understanding that when I set certain boundaries and when I make certain choices and I upset people or I disappoint people, and in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh, I know their perception is going to change of me. I know they're not going to think I'm this perfectly nice angel anymore. And when you put so much of your identity in that, which I did, it's kind of hard. It's very unsettling knowing that there are going to be people, and there are people today that think I'm an idiot and think that I'm whatever for talking about the LDS church and talking about why I left. I know there are members of my family right now who think the way that I navigate my life and speak truth on this podcast is wrong, and they're offended. They're hurt. I know it hurts people. I know it rubs people the wrong way. I know people's perception of me has changed. I used to be this nice, bubbly girl, and now I'm different. And I like to think I'm still really nice and I love people and my intention is always pure. And that's my goal, is to always correct my heart posture and always correct my intention to make sure my intentions are in the right place. And if I'm ever doing something out of love and truth, that's what matters to me. But in the moment, it's uncomfortable because I'm like, I feel like I'm going to be misunderstood. And the fear of being misunderstood sucks. The fear of thinking that people are going to think you're mean or that you've changed when you put so much identity in this people pleaser version of yourself sucks. Like, it's hard to let go of the old you that was so nice and so kind, and the one that everyone relied on to keep the peace. People always used to say, she is just the peacekeeper. And now I'm like, you know what? No, I'm the peacemaker. Hey, and I am nice. And I probably will let you take advantage of me once or twice, but then I'm going to set some boundaries. Then I'm going to stand up for myself. And it's like, I naturally still very much tend to fall into those people-pleasing tendencies, or at least pleasing tendencies, and wanting others to like me. But I'm actively trying to walk out of that, because I feel like it actually pushes you into a place of being able to be genuine and authentic and genuinely love others, authentically love others. Like, do it from a place of just doing it, not because you want other people to think you're a loving person. Like, I want to love others radically because I just love them, not because I care about what they think of me, not because I'm fearful of their reputation being tainted of me if I ever choose to set a boundary or speak the truth or hold someone accountable or set limits and say no. I want to be seen as authentic and kind and loving, but not because I'm trying to do it to appease the world and appease people in my life. And that's really hard, especially when you used to be the one that would just let people walk all over you. Yeah, and I think it can be really hard changing how you interact with others that only know and or love the old version of you, the version that just kind of let anything happen. I think that's where it's the hardest, is in those old relationships, because those dynamics have already formed. So it's hard to like come out of that. And yeah, and I think too, it's just like the internal battle is like, sometimes when I'm doing something, I feel bad and I feel like I just try so hard to protect people. I've always been like that. Protect, 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 protect. And my therapist called me out the other day. She's like, why are you trying to protect these people? Like, let people walk in the consequences of their own actions. Why are you trying to protect and throw yourself out on the line for someone who doesn't even care, who doesn't even want it? It's like, but I'm trying so hard to protect them, to protect them, to protect them. And they're not doing anything to protect themselves or to change their actions, to remove the consequences of their actions. They are just blazing through, and I am just trying to protect them, just trying to protect them. And I've always been like that. And my therapist literally called me out for it the other day, and I was like, dang, okay. Gotta stop protecting people who don't want to be protected. I gotta stop protecting people to the point where I am throwing myself out there for people who don't even care. You know? And that's hard. That's hard. It's confusing to feel like you're not the person that you used to be, and that people's perception of you might change. And it's really hard to change those habits, because there's just this part of you that just wants to sacrifice your own comfort and needs and just your own self and throw yourself out there online for people who don't even care. You know, it's like, there's nothing wrong with wanting to always try to do the right thing and wanting to protect and help. But it's like, why are you helping someone who doesn't want the help? You know, if that makes sense. It's just confusing. And I think part of that is just really letting go of that identity, and realigning with the identity of someone who prioritizes their own well-being, stands firm in their values, and isn't afraid to let others down in the process. That's what I'm trying to do out here, man. And it's freaking hard. But if I could tell you guys one thing, anyone listening to this who's under the age of 26, it's that being a peacekeeper is out and being a peacemaker is in. And that's really going to change your life for the better. And it's a process. It's a process. It's like a lot of deconstructing you have to do within it. Take the pressure off yourself to always keep the peace and to be the exact version of yourself you were before you started healing. Take the pressure off yourself. Check your intentions, check your heart. If your intentions are pure and you're trying to love people from an honest, true, authentic place, that is good. That is good, and that's what matters. A little bit of uncomfortableness and a little bit of conflict here and there won't hurt anyone. It actually produces good fruit, good change, good growth for you and that person. So I just want to encourage you guys that if you feel mean or you feel like you're having a hard time letting go of the identity of the person who let people walk all over them, let people take advantage of them, protected everyone over themselves, took care of everyone else's needs other than themselves, and constantly was dealing with mistreatment, abuse, betrayal, whatever it may be. You're not selfish for wanting better for yourself. And give yourself grace along the way as you're navigating it, because it's not, this stuff doesn't change overnight, y'all. Let me just tell you something. I've been going to therapy since I was 20, and I'm 26. Dang. And let me just tell you, this is something that's still hard for me, and something that I'm literally dealing with right now, that I'm like, oh, in a situation. I can't say much about it. Not my relationship with David. A different situation. And it's hard. And I'm having to remind myself, Nicole, you're not mean. You're not a bad person. Your intentions aren't mean. You love people. You want to do what's right. You want to fight for people who need to be fought for. You want to fight for what's right. And if people's perception of you changes along the way, who cares? I don't want to be known as the boundaryless, bulldozing girl who just lets people take advantage of her. I want to be someone who loves loudly, proudly, with boundaries, and with authenticity, who stands up for what they believe is right and who they believe needs fighting for. That's what I want. And that shift is scary and it's hard. So I just want to encourage you guys to really open the door if you guys haven't learned about healthy boundaries, especially if you come from any type of trauma and you feel like you struggle with being a people pleaser or letting people take advantage of you, or being a peacekeeper. I want you to really look at your relationships and analyze. And if you feel like, oh crap, you know what? I do really struggle with that. And I do really actually want to start taking care of myself. And I do want to have these changes. I want to encourage you that it is not, overnight, and also that you're not alone. And that the first step is realizing that you deserve more and that you want more for you, which will help you actually love people better. So that's the first step. You're doing amazing. Do research. I'm no expert here. I'm not a therapist. I recommend and encourage you, if you have the means or the ability to speak to a therapist, that would be amazing. If not, research, go and follow all the psychology accounts that are really trusted, and start, if you're a believer, start asking God how you can set boundaries, because God loves boundaries. The boundary lines fall in perfect places, he says. But yeah, I just want you guys to see that it's so messy and it's so complicated. And these are just things I'm unlearning and dealing with. And it's hard. And I've been dealing with the guilt of feeling like the fear of judgment and how I used to be so different. And it's really tricky. And if you guys want to share your stories with me, if there's certain ways you're struggling, DM me, email me, talk to someone, talk to them, tell them what you're going through. Because I can almost guarantee you feel like you're alone, but someone will probably understand and relate. Okay, I guess that closes out this episode. Guys, I love you so much. You guys are amazing. Thank you guys for being so supportive of me and me just trying to be a human in this life. Because we're just trying to all figure it out, right? Right? But yeah, I love you guys so much. You guys know if you want to support me, you can follow this podcast on all the channels: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. And you can also share this episode or short clips on your stories, share it with a friend, tell your mom about it. Also, a huge way you can support me that I love, love, love is give this podcast a rating and review on Spotify and or Apple. That helps me a ton. I love you guys so very much. Please keep me in the loop. Let me know what topics you guys want me to talk about. Let me know who you guys want to see on the podcast. And without further ado, I will close this episode out by saying, what elephants are in your room? My name is Nicole, and I will talk to you next week.